political climate. Talk to us about the community work that you have been engaged in and how honoring queer, black, and trans excellence reflects in that work.
So first, I just want to say thank you again, Caribbean Poverty Project, for having me and my most distinguished panel judges. I'm super excited to be here. I'm just going to say that I'm going to talk with rage, passion, and rage. So I just want y'all to be aware. So when it comes to this political, this climate, as an advocate and activist, I've been doing this work for over a decade. I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. I'm not even. I feel like I'm in a fog, right? And so how I've been combating is just that making sure that the equity in all spaces that I congregate, there's more than one black person in there. When they're asking about my experience, I tell them I'm not a monolith. I'm always bringing and amplifying the voices of our black trans community and making sure that we're getting paid. Because if we're going to continuously be called to action to do this work, I need, I tell them all the time, I said, when I'm questioned about, how do you do this work? I said, I need to get paid on time because I like Ubers, Uber Eats, lavish trips, and shoes that come with a desk bag. Because once I get paid, I'm taking a trip because I can no longer decompress in this country. I haven't been able to decompress following the work for years now. And so I always follow the equity and making sure that not only myself is getting paid, but everybody that looks like me that come along with me are getting paid top dollars to do this traumatizing, triggering work.
When I first started performing, I thought that I needed to do more to advocate and things, but I realized that just being a visible trans woman is advocating in itself. So anytime that I'm performing at a white bar or any bar really in New York City, I make sure to be visible, but also to do numbers that are going to impact the audience, but also tell a story that I'm bringing. You know, I just don't want to do any number just because to make money. So I think, in a sense, that's kind of my advocacy, performing and being visible. And I've kind of, in this year, I've been able to be okay with that because I always thought I needed to do more. And I do want to do more advocacy, but this year I've really realized that just performing and showing up and being a black trans woman in these spaces that are a lot of gay men, you know what I'm saying? And I'm usually the only black trans woman in these spaces. So in that self, it's like, here I am, take me or leave me. So that's kind of like how I advocate.
So right, so 20 years, whether it was with Caribbean Pride and also with AOP, so I don't necessarily work, I work differently now. So in those spaces, I was with people who look like me, who are like me, right? Now I work with people who don't look like me, right? And what I have to do is basically I have to make sure that not only my voice is being heard, but also other people's voices are being heard as well. As an example, so I am on, or I should say, I'm on the DEIB Council for the Gay Coaching Alliance, right? And that group is white, 50s, right? Definitely don't look like us in this room, right? And I remember joining and saying, should I do this? Should I be here? And of course I should be there. I'm a coach. They're a coach. We have similarities. We have clients, etc. And I said, okay, this is the work I need to do now, and to make sure that my voice is being heard and other people who come into the organization, their voices are being heard. Actually, we're having conversations now around opening up our membership, which we haven't had before, right? So before it was just only gay men, right? So now we're having conversations about opening it up to the queer spectrum. And I'm part of that conversation, right? Or leading that conversation. So that's basically the work that I've been doing now.
Now, Caribbean Equality Project for always, really carving out this space for us to have these conversations. As a storyteller, I have been pushing toward creating spaces for Black queer folks on camera. And I feel that that is the purpose of my work. The power of the work is that I don't know when someone in the future will encounter my work. And so I think about, crafting Caribbean Queen and putting Muhammad on camera, telling the story of New York, telling the story of how New York Pride, how the big truck came to be. And thinking about that 20 years from now, someone is going to find Caribbean Queen in a library, online somewhere, and turn that on and see that history. So, I'm really cognizant of the work I do in terms of storytelling. And, the same thing, when I first came to New York, I was feeling out of place. And finding my voice through the revival within the Word, which was a salon-style poetry tour put on by Jade Flower Foster. And it gathered women of color in living room spaces, and it no longer exists. But the beauty of it is that people can put that on and go back to that moment, go back to those words, go back to that power. So, the image is power, and we cannot forget. That's why they want to erase books. That's why they want to ban films. Because the art form is power, it's the archive. And so as a storyteller, I'm creating our archive. I'm creating literally the future. And so I love this aspect of thinking about it as Black Future, because while we're experiencing the pain of today, and it is painful, we wake up every day, there's a new executive order, we are cowering in fear. We know that the future has not been written as yet. And so if we start today telling our stories, going forward, not being afraid to speak up, we know that we can have a future. So thank you for this naming. I think this is really grounding us today.
What does that look like to you all from your vantage point? How is from struggles to thriving, embodied in the work that you're doing, in you just being you and existing on a panel like today's panel?
Language has always been our teacher in history, right? And going through nonprofit spaces and learning about all my nuances and my intersectionality, I've learned that a lot of words were given to me, but I never believed that. And so, struggle. I saw a video of how a lot of our Caribbean families have migrated to the States, and we was told that we lived poorly in our countries when we had everything we needed that the earth provided us. Sun, we had culture, we had all these amenities, and now that we were told to come to this country and the struggle was more real. Versus back home where we wasn't poor, we had abundance. And so for me, it's to remind myself of I'm not what I've been told. I'm not that, and to continuously be the example. And when we talk about erasure, I'm like, I see beautiful Black people across the spectrum. And our stories are continuing and being documented. So what are you erasing, right? And what are you trying to program into us, our youth? And so it's for me to continue to say that I'm not crazy. I've been told most of my experiences in life have not happened to me. And I refuse for this administration, I refuse for my friends, I refuse for anything that I do or touch, speak in that we're being erased because we're continuously celebrating ourselves.
Sure, so something you just said, JAHLOVE, around, be the example, right? And part of being the example is also doing your own work, the healing work. And I would say that's basically what's elevating myself, or ourselves, right? It's doing the healing work, and that shit is not easy at all, okay? So it's doing shadow work, internal family systems. It's going back to your first disruptive story as a child. And really, back then, you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't know what decisions you were making back then. You didn't have the tools, right? So now it's really unpacking that and then unlearning and then learning and then eventually teaching, right? That's basically, I would say, the way to elevate ourselves and elevate our communities is basically unlearning to then moving it towards teaching. And I will say also for me, like I don't think let me see. I've been a certified coach since 2018, and ever since then I've had a coach since then. I've had a therapist since then, right? We in the Caribbean grow up, like, if you go to a therapist, you're crazy. And you don't talk about those things, right? But no, we need to talk about mental health and mental wellness. Constantly. Constantly.
So I'm gonna piggyback off of some of the things you said, but I feel like elevating, so I'm gonna start from the beginning of my life. I grew up in foster care. I got placed in foster care at the age of 3 because my mom had died from a drug overdose, and I never knew my father. So my beginning of my life was really, really hard. Even in foster care, I was molested by foster parents. So I had a lot of trauma, but I say that to say that it's not about how you start, it's about the journey. And sometimes it's not even about how you finish. If you're comfortable and you're content with the work that you're doing, that's the most important thing. Because everyone's journey and everyone's life is different. So I've learned that you cannot compare yourself to other people, no matter if they could be the same color, they could be this, the same sexuality. You cannot compare yourself. So if you're doing the work and really taking a look inside yourself and not going back to the past and thinking about the past too much. Now you can think about it because you have to go back to move forward. But I've learned, don't get stuck in the past. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I think is elevating, is doing the work and really focusing on being a better you.
One of the things that you said is about the journey. And I think back as an asylum seeker, as many folks in the room are, it all starts with a choice. It all starts with a decision. In our respective countries, there is a decision for you to stay, for you to comply, for you to hide, for you to go along with what the program is. And if any of us had made that choice to stay, and there's a lot of people that can't make the big decision, the big leap, for many reasons. But if I had not personally made that decision to move, to choose to move, I would not have developed into the filmmaker, into the storyteller I am today. I would not have met my wife. I would not be living a full life as a queer immigrant lesbian. And so when we think about this idea of going from, in quote, struggle to thriving, it is a journey. It is a journey that really requires us to be brave, really requires us to be bold, and really requires us to first make a choice. And I was talking to an individual before, and they asked me, well, how can I, work with you? And I said, it all starts with one, what are the tools that it takes for you to develop for yourself? And so that's like the choice. And then how can you move forward? I did not become the filmmaker out of the box. You have to take one day at a time, one step at a time. And so I think if we remind ourselves that right now, in this moment, that it just takes us speaking up to one person, speaking our truth to one person, going and reaching across to one person, I think we are going to be able to make it through this moment. And we will be thriving. So we just have to make that choice.
What's that authenticity looking like?
I think that we need to, again, look at our history, right? The attack on our trans siblings have not just started this year.
Talk about it.
It has been happening for years.
Yes.
It happened when Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson,
right.
mother of this movement, was alienated for what they started by white queer people. And the struggle has been consistently there. I have been upset with our black and brown communities because our trans siblings have been saying that we've been attacked And that now we need the government to show us versus that what we've been seeing in our own spaces and having not talk about the injustices. And so authentically look like for me is that I've always been speaking and continuously speaking and having the back of my trans family members, because 90% of my family marker is people of trans experience, women of trans experience, gender nonconforming, trans men, and just to see consistently that they've been attacked and our spaces have not even been safe for their spaces. I think that it is time for us to really tell our trans siblings, gender nonconforming, and non-binary community members, sit this one out and call community members in and say, what are y'all doing? Right? And that's what I've been doing, is saying, like, stop calling our trans siblings in to do the work that they've already been doing since the beginning. It is our time to show up and rally behind. And so that is what I'm saying, that we need to, how authentic. I scream at Butch Queens all the time. I scream at Butch Queens all the time, you know? And I want to say to our trans community members, like, stop uplifting a community that's not going to hold you up. Now it's time to be selfish. Rally behind yourself. Preserve your coins. If they don't have your money, don't show up. Let us do the work finally, let us do the work and show up for our trans community.
Absolutely.
So I would say it's about intention. And how are you stepping into, or what are you doing to decide on what you're going to do? So whether it's a project, or whether it's work, or anything. So for instance, for me, my intention in the music that I create, right? So I'm also an artist as well. So, and I'm very intentional on what type of music, what kind of message am I saying in my music. I just don't write music or collaborate with folks just to talk about booty shaking, which is nothing wrong about booty shaking, right? Nothing wrong with booty shaking, right? But you can do booty shaking with intention, right? There's a way to do so. I mean, it's also, well, I won't go there, but basically,
please go there. Please, why are we doing this? Please, please go
no,
there.
I mean, wait, you can do. It's also a rebellion. That's what I wanted to say. You know, you could do booty shaking for rebellion, but basically, it's about being intentional. Also, who I work with. Right? I'm at the stage where I can work with certain types of folks, or the community or the spaces I'm able to work in now at this stage, right? A couple of weeks ago, I had a day-long intensive with BIPOC entrepreneurs, and in that room were queer and straight folk. And it was such a beautiful moment that it was about 15 of us, online and in person, that were just sharing our stories, our struggles, our joys, our hope as being entrepreneurs in this moment, in this time. And I also work with white folks as well, right? But also being intentional how I'm working with that. So whether if I'm working with someone who wants clarity or just unsure about how to work with teams or how to really focus on DEIB, right? Like who's curious and also who wants to learn and wants to do more. That's the folks that I want to work with.
Okay, so I was attacked. I know I'm just telling all these sad stories, but
This is the space for it,
so
my dear.
2 years ago, I was attacked because I'm from Washington, D.C. originally, yes. But, so I was attacked 2 years ago. It was a hate crime, and it was like a big thing on the news, because like no one helped me. Like it was a whole thing. I was in a coma for like 4 weeks. It was a hard, traumatic experience for me, but I think it's important to show up for those people when things aren't happening. Because when I got attacked, yes, everyone showed up for me. People sent me thousands of dollars. And I did love that money at that time. Yes, I did. But I think it's important to show up when things aren't happening. Because those are the most important situations to help people. Because we're all dealing with things, especially as a Black trans woman, every day. But I don't talk about it. You know, so it's like, I think it's important to, if you see a trans person, give them a hug, you know, smile at them, say, oh, you look so beautiful, because that really help someone who's dealing with things. And also, I think it's important to have a seat at the table for trans people and Black people too.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes they have a whole table, but they don't want to give you that seat. They want you to scrape, and grovel for it, But I think it's important to have different voices in a room because that's the only way you're going to come to a solution.
So, as we move along with our or one of our last themes for the night, Black, Queer, Trans, Immigrant, Caribbean, Futurism. Where do we go from here? Where are we going from here, y'all? Our specific question centers, in an era of consistently deliberate erasure, how do we continue to honor and uplift our past fights for diversity, equality, and inclusion? Right? I want to name the other E in the so-called DEI that they always seem to be attacking. So, in this divided country, how are we honoring and uplifting ourselves? What advice do you have for the person that may have been through the same issues as you all? We have had the same stumbling blocks and the same rocks thrown at them throughout their life. How are we, what are we doing in this divided country, to get back to happy? What's that toolkit looking like for y'all? I know we touched on mental health. What are the other tools in the kit that we're using to get to happy?
Is what we have to build on. If we don't build the organizations that are here for us right now, we're not going to have them in the future. So, first of all, thank you all for supporting Caribbean Equality Project. It's super important. And then just in our own communities, being accountable for showing up for each other when someone calls. We can't say that, we can't complain about DEI falling if we can't just interpersonally manage our relationships on a very one-to-one level. And I encourage you, if you have fissures, cracks in your own interpersonal relationships, that you go and you fix them. This is not a time for us to be separate. This is a time for us to come together. And so often I find that people are talking about large countrywide issues, and interpersonally, if you look around their circle, it looks the same.
Oh, you just touched it. That's
right. If you're sitting in a room and every time it looks exactly the same, and you're saying that trans lives matter, but there's no trans lives in your circle, you have to interrogate that. So I think interpersonally we have to make a change, and that, if we do that, that will have a ripple effect across. We would not have what we have now. People would not have voted as they did if interpersonally they had trans people in the space. They would not, because they would be voting against their friend. They would not do that. So before because we love philosophies and platitudes and all that stuff, right? And we love to do a hashtag. Examine yourself today. And then challenge other people that you see saying the same things. Challenge them too. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I would say to add to that is kind of what's old is new again. I do think we have to go back to kind of what happened in the 80s, where we had to congregate for ourselves and in our own spaces, right? When we did ciphers or other types of meetings, right? And in those meetings, yes, there's the connection that's important, right? So getting off of the Zoom, getting off of the Google Meet, getting off of that, and being in person, as you were mentioning. And also making sure that we celebrate each other. Like, even in times of struggle, it's important that we also celebrate as well, right? As you know, when folks are doing marches, and also, it's important that you have, the healing spaces alongside with them, right? So that's also important that we have that. And hope. hope is a big thing. Hope is just, it's like a sparkle that just, can multiply. So I would say, be in these spaces, create these spaces where it's us, and also making sure that we're in other spaces, and also making sure that we celebrate and we have hope.
I didn't care that these 5 Fortune companies didn't speak about Black Lives Matter because they, at the end of the day, they're a corporation, they're capitalists, and so everybody money is who they have to appease. I was really disappointed in the nonprofit organization that was receiving state and federal funding for Black and brown bodies, but was afraid to say Black Lives Matter. And so I realized that you can't get me to come to your organization if you can't rally around my issues publicly. And so I said, we have to go where the money is. And if there's an organization that's receiving monies for Black and brown bodies, and they're not doing right by them, you call them out, and you take up space. And so we have to strategize and go where the money is. So what the future looks like is us, if they're not going to prioritize those dollars like they claim they are, then we call them their funders and take it away from them, and we're gonna create our own or make sure that goes to the right people and hands. For the future, I also see that we need, and this is for my trans community, it's always been this scandal between sex workers and politicians. If they can prioritize your services but not vote for your right so that you can have a livelihood, give them hell. If they're going to live these next 4 years with their families but still can create, I understand the safety, but here's what I'm saying is that now it's strategy, battle tactics, right? If they're going to pay you, make sure that they're also going to acknowledge or rally around our issues because, again, our trans community is under attack, but we have to go where the money is. And if your life is going to be hell for the next 4 years, make their life hell. That's my message on that. And if these organizations are receiving money for Black and brown bodies and not making sure that they are prioritizing those dollars, let's sue them. Let's sue them, not only the government, but sue these organizations that claim that they're doing the work for us, and we can't get a dollar or speak to their CEO or anything like that. We have to now call not only the government out, but these organizations, because they have it on their websites, and if we do not see us in any type of form of leadership, they have to lose their funding so they can go to right organizations.
You're giving some gifts tonight. Walk away more educated.